We are now moving to a part of the module where we're introducing how to parse verbs, and verbs have different components or parsing elements that are very different from what you would expect with a noun. So we're going to go over parsing. So some of the qualities of verb that are emphasized in parsing is the tense of the verb, and in Greek, the tense of the verb focuses on the form or morphology of the verb. So the emphasis of tense, which is different from English, is on the form or morphology of the verb. So while time will be used to refer when an action takes place, we talk about the three times in English as past, present, and future. When we parse verbs, we only refer to the tense and not the time. And there are 7 tenses in Greek, 7 tenses. We have the present tense, the future, the imperfect, the aorist, the pluperfect, the perfect, and the future perfect. And for chapter 16, we'll be introducing one form of the present tense, that's the present active indicative. And then in chapter 17, we'll introduce the middle and passive forms. There are 3 kinds of time in Greek as in English. But Greek does have present time, does have past time, does have future time, but you won't see that used in the parsing elements. Again, the focus instead will be on the tenses. Greek also has 3 voices. There's the active voice, where the subject does the action, the verb, so the man hit the ball. There's a passive voice, where the subject receives the action, the verb. So an example of a passive voice construction is the ball was hit by the man. So the ball is the subject of the sentence. Was hit is a passive form verb construction, and by the man shows agency. There's a voice that occurs in Greek that you do not see in English at all, and that's called the middle voice. And that's when the subject does the action, the verb, but sometimes the action falls back upon the subject, or the subject is acting upon itself. So while this is a rare example of what we call the reflexive middle, and the reflexive middle is the least common form of the middle voice, it is the most readily understandable form of the middle voice. So a good example of this was Matthew 27, verse 25. Judas hanged himself. So where it says Judas hanged himself, the word himself is actually not used. Hanged is actually in the middle voice, and it's translated as hanging himself because the action, Judas is doing both the action, the hanging, and he's also the direct object of that action himself. So that's an example of what we call the reflexive middle. Or here's another one, Mark 14:54. Peter was warming himself by the fire, where the verb was warming is in the middle voice. So when you parse verbs, verbs have tense, they have voice, and they also have what we call mood. And mood refers to the relationship between the verb and whether the action of the verb is real or just simply a possibility. And we're going to be spending a lot of time in what we call the indicative mood, the mood of reality, the most common mood used in the entire New Testament. And so we won't get to other moods until the second semester of the course in Greek 2. But just so you know, there are 5 moods in Greek. There is the indicative mood, the subjunctive, the infinitive mood, the imperative mood, and the optative mood. The indicative is the mood of reality. The subjunctive, which is a mood we don't see in English, but we do have them in other Indo-European languages like Spanish, is a mood of possibility. If something is possible, we can put it in the subjunctive mood, although it's not a reality yet. The infinitive mood is anytime we have, it's a mood of state or aspect. So it's anytime you have a construction like to run or to become. Or to whatever the verb is. This is what we call the infinitive mood. The imperative mood is commands. So if I hear to say run or be a good person, those are commands. And optative, which is a form that we'll review in Greek, but you won't really study in any depth. It's the least common, is the mood of polite request. So when we parse a verb, We'll always parse it in this order: by person, whether it's first, second, or third; by number, whether it's singular or plural; by tense, whether it's the present tense, the imperfect tense, the future tense, the aorist tense, the pluperfect tense, the future perfect tense, etc. Whatever the tense might be. There are 7 tenses in Greek. Voice, there's 3 voices. It's either going to be active, middle, or passive. The mood, of which there are 5. We're going to focus mostly on the indicative for the time being. And then after you identify the different parsing elements: person, number, tense, voice, mood, as with nouns, you have to give the lexical form of the verb and then also the inflected definition. But right before we give an example of how to parse a verb, let's go over the morphological components of a verb. And here I'm going to look at the example luomen, which means we are loosing. Its lexical form is luo. This is what you see in the dictionary, luo, which means I am loosing or I loose. You can refer to I'm loosing or untying my shoes. It can be sometimes translated as I'm loosing or freeing a person from prison. Luo is not a commonly used word in the New Testament, but it's such a regular verb that whenever we introduce a new tense or form of the verb, we're going to use luo as our paradigmatic verb or example for how the form is used. And when we look at this example, particular example, luomen, we are loosing, Mounce divides up the different parts of the verb or the components of the verb by identifying lu as the stem, a as the connecting vowel, and men as what we call the primary active suffix. So if we look at the example, here's lu, here's the connecting vowel, and here's men, which is the primary active suffix. And while Mounce treats these units distinctly and separately, for our purposes, I'm going to teach how to memorize the ending by connecting the connecting vowel and the primary suffix together. So you're going to learn the endings of verbs, not in 3 parts, but in 2. You have the stem here, and then you have the connecting vowel plus suffix together, or the ending of the verb. So when we learn verbs, we're going to be dividing verbs into 2 parts. Here's the stem, lu, and amen is the connecting vowel plus the primary suffix together. And what that does is, whenever you look at the end of the verb is what tells you whether it's first, second, third person, whether it's plural, whether it's an active voice or not. Lu tells you what the verb means in a particular tense. So luomen, if I were to divide this, we are loosing. That's first person. That's a mistake there, a typo. That's plural. It's for we is plural, right? So first person, we is plural. It's a present tense, it's active, and it's indicative. Those are the parsing elements. Its lexical form is luo. Its translation is we are loosing. And sometimes it can mean to lose something means to also, it can be in context, can mean destroy. It has either translation. But we're going to take the non-violent translation and use loosing.